In this video, I'm going to tell you the 4 biggest mistakes that people make on their wedding invitations so that you can avoid them. So let's dive in. Hi, I'm Lainey. I'm a wedding invitation designer. If you want to check out all of our wedding invitation collections, our Etsy shop is linked in the description of this video. And I also teach people how to become stationery designers. So if you're interested in that, check out all the other videos here on our channel. So I think a lot of people consider wedding invitations to be kind of a last minute thing that they just throw together and get something out because they have to, especially with save the dates, because we're often not ready to think about all the little details of the wedding at that point. So people just kind of say, oh, it's a piece of paper, people are going to throw it away. And I just wonder if you've ever seen someone's fridge or even your own fridge, because in a lot of cases, wedding invitations are the main thing that people are looking at for a year leading up to your wedding. And then also after your wedding, a lot of times people leave the invitations and save the dates up on their fridge for a long time. So I'd like to challenge you to think of wedding invitations as a slightly more functional piece than you might be thinking, and not think of them as kind of just a throwaway, okay, I'll get something out because I have to, but think of it as the only thing that your guests are seeing about your wedding and all the decisions and work that you're putting into planning this wedding. This is the only key that your guests are getting in the entire year leading up to it, about what to expect there. So it is a very functional piece, and it can really give your guests something to expect, something to look forward to, and something to cherish after the event. So I don't want you to make any of these mistakes, and some of them are going to cost you money, and I'll tell you how to avoid spending a little extra money. So the first one can cost you a lot of extra money, which is confusing your guest count and your invite count. So if you're inviting 100 guests to your wedding, probably a lot of those people are dates, families, etc. So you don't actually need 100 invitations or save the dates. You probably need somewhere around 70. So I've had clients kind of order 150, and then after it's ordered, they send me their address list and they only have 65 addresses on it. And they've had to end up paying for that because they accidentally mixed up the guest count and the invite count. We have steps in place to avoid that now, but it has happened in the past. So make sure you're including your invite count. If you know your guest count and you don't know exactly your household count quite yet, I do recommend making the spreadsheet in households, not in individual guests. But if you haven't done that, then you can just guess about 70% when you're ordering. And then once you create your address list, you'll be able to see exactly how many invites you need. At least if you work with me, I'm pretty flexible. Like you can start out with 70, and then if it's like 68 or 75, it's not a big deal to change that. Then when you get into day of stuff like escort cards, favors, etc., you need to switch back to the guest count. So the invites and save the dates are really the only thing where you're using kind of household count instead of guest count. The second thing is also about quantity, which is just ordering enough extra. It's really expensive every time I need to order something for my printer. There's minimums, there's setup costs, there's shipping, etc. So ordering one after the fact is going to cost at least double what it would have cost to just add on one at the beginning. My magic number, if you're ordering around 100 invites, which is pretty common, is to order 7 extra. And this gives you a keepsake for each family, 1 for the photographer, a keepsake for you, and then 3 extras for if people have moved and not told you, or if some get lost in the mail, or if you decide to invite someone else. If you have kind of a B list of invites that you want to send out, if people, more people say no from the A list than you expect, then I would order a few more extras for that because you're already planning to definitely send some of those out. But there's always a couple where there's a typo in the address, or they moved and didn't tell you, or just something happened, and I promise it's way easier to order an extra on the front end than to have to go back and get it on the back end. A third mistake that I see people make is not including postage when you're kind of budgeting everything, or not understanding the different postage things that will affect the cost. So you're going to need a stamp on your RSVP envelope. That's just going to be a regular forever stamp in most cases, and that's so that your guests can send the RSVP envelope back. We don't want to make that harder for them. The only exception to this rule is if you send to an international guest, they're going to need a stamp from their country to send it back to you, so just leave that blank. So right now that stamp is about 60 cents, so make sure you're including that cost. And then for the outside of the envelope, if you have a pretty standard invitation, this one has invite details card but no RSVP envelope in here, this one's only going to be 1 ounce, and it will just require 1 forever stamp. However, if you do something with a wax seal on it, or this one has a lot of different cards and also has this little string and tag, and it's kind of oversized, it definitely weighs more than 1 ounce, so you're going to have to add additional postage. If you have a wax seal specifically, or a bow or something that makes it not totally flat, it's not gonna be able to go through the machines and you're gonna need to pay a non-machinable surcharge. Right now that's 30 cents, but check before you mail something because these change about every 6 months. So just a couple of things to watch out for is like a bow or wax seal that's gonna make it not flat all the way across. That'll prevent it from going through a machine. You can also have to pay the non-machinable surcharge if you do a square invitation because the machines can't tell which way to read it because there's no short and long side. Anything that's super oversized, not like this, which is 5.5 by 8.5, but something that's more than 6 or 7 inches on the short side could also require additional postage, and then anything with additional ounces as well. You might also need to pay the non-machinable surcharge if you use vintage stamps and you don't want them to go through as many machines. That kind of prevents them from being torn up a little bit, but there's always a risk of things getting a little bit torn up. They're still gonna be really beautiful upon arriving at your destination. And then lastly, if you can't bend the envelope over a counter is usually the way that they do it, over the corner of a counter, then it might need to go parcel rate, which is going to jump you up to at least $1, $2, maybe even $3 per envelope, depending on the weight of the envelope. So that's like actually mailing kind of a package. So the key is to keep it bending, which you can do even if you use, like this is a double thick with 3 inserts and it still bends pretty well, but I would just say maybe avoid using double thick for all of your cards. Do double thick for the invitation and then single thick for all the insert cards. Or if you're having a ton of different inserts, you might want to think about sending 1 or 2 of them separately, like for rehearsal dinner or something like that. Or you might get up into those parcel rates. I don't see it too often, especially if you're like DIYing your invitations, but if you're using acrylic or really thick materials, you might get into that point. And the fourth mistake that I see is just timing. If you want to work with a designer, you need to book them far in advance, especially post-pandemic. We are getting booked out way sooner, just like every single wedding vendor. So I'm already booked out over a year in advance for some events, and that's kind of never happened in my career before. So keep that in mind. If you want to work with someone who's really custom and you definitely want to work with this person, just go ahead and get on their calendar as soon as possible. Some designers won't quote you more than a year in advance, or they'll kind of say, oh, I'll honor my design fee, but the cost of the goods might go up because that just might happen and we can't always predict it. So just try and go ahead and get on the calendar as early as possible, or reach out to them and say, how early do I need to get on your calendar? If you're a little bit later than that while you're watching this, then try to get on someone's calendar at least 6 months before your wedding. I always require a month for design and a month for production for custom orders. So that's 2 full months where we're making your invitations. I need to book you at least a little bit, at least a day or 2 before that starts. And then we want to send your invitations ideally 10 to 12 weeks before the wedding. So that means we're starting on the process about 5 months before your wedding. If you want to do semi-custom or something like minted that's pre-designed, you can start a little bit later in the process, but it's a good idea to go ahead and have an idea of what you want to do so that you can plan that out correctly. And you still want to send within that ideal time frame of 10 to 12 months for the wedding. I have seen people send their invitations too early, which means that your guests are just going to take the RSVP card, toss it on the counter, say, I'll do that later. I haven't even booked my flights. I haven't even thought about that yet. It's so far in advance. And then they're not going to. They're going to forget to. And then you're going to have to follow up with them, which is annoying and sometimes frustrating. So you can send them too early. You can also send them too late. You really want to get your seating chart done about a month before your wedding so you can get it to all the vendors that need it. But in order to make that happen, your guests need to get your invitations at least 2 weeks before that. So you want them to get the invitations about 6 weeks before the wedding, meaning you need to send them, I'd say at minimum 8 weeks before the wedding. The post office is taking a little bit longer than usual post-pandemic. So I am aiming for that 10 to 12 week timeline with most of my clients, but you can get by with 8 weeks if you need to. Okay, so as a reminder, those 4 mistakes are confusing the guest and invite count. Happens way more often than you think. Second is not ordering enough extras. Third is not calculating postage at all, or calculating it incorrectly, or choosing a design choice that accidentally ups the postage too much. And fourth is just kind of messing up the timing, and usually that means not starting early enough, although sometimes it can mean starting a little bit too early. But in general, of course, early is always better than late, so get on that as soon as possible, especially if you have someone specific in mind that you want to book. If you'd like to work with us, you can go to our Etsy shop in the description and reach out to us there about customizing any of the suites that you see in the shop. I hope you'll consider it if you're still planning your wedding and need invitations. And if you want to become a stationery designer, we have so many other videos on this channel that are going to help you with that goal. Thanks, everyone.